Welcome back, everyone, to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. I'm excited to welcome my colleague Alex Bickford, who's a former financial aid officer at Southern New Hampshire University, to the show today. Hi, Alex.
Hi Beth, how's it going?
Good, good. We are talking about rising interest rates today.
Um,
Um, well, one quick question I have for you. I know we're waiting on some information, just somewhat unrelated to the rising interest rates. Can you tell us what we're waiting for that has not arrived at the moment that we are taping today's podcast?
yeah, so the T-bill Treasury auction is today that will dictate what federal student loan interest rates are for the 2022-2023 school year. So for any loans that are dispersed between July 1st of 22 and June 30th of 23, that information is coming out today. So I might get it in the next few minutes, but please, when you are listening to this, it's probably Thursday, if I'm remembering correctly. You can
Yep.
go to our blog. On our blog, we'll have all the new interest rates out there and some quick synopsis on our thoughts on that. We do expect them to be a touch higher than this year. So it does relate to rising interest rates to some
Yeah.
degree.
Yes, unfortunately, it definitely does. Yeah, we were hoping we could announce it on air, although this isn't airing for another week. So by the time you hear this, it will be somewhat old news anyway. But hey, if you haven't heard about it and you're thinking about it, if you are a parent like me of a current senior and in the coming year you are thinking about borrowing for college, or you're already in the middle of borrowing for college, this is going to be important information for you to know about. All right, I'm going to shift gears. I am, as I just mentioned, a parent
Right?
of a senior, right? And so rising interest rates, certainly something that I've been paying attention to, along with the stock market not being in a particularly great place today, and hasn't been for probably the last 4 or 5 days. Um, let's start with this one. Does it make more sense to borrow right now or to use my savings? My savings is not where it was,
Right?
and I'm hoping it's going to rebound. And I say this for all parents, not really specific to me, although yes, I'm a little
Yeah.
impacted by this. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Normally, I'm normally a person who says, let's spend what you have when you have it and
Hmm.
borrow what you need when you need it. We are in a very different time, it looks like, over the right, at least right now.
Hmm.
And so as we come into next year, I do worry that if the stock market continues to be where it is now, that we're going to be back where we were maybe in 2010, where borrowers were saying, okay, does it make more sense? Can I wait on this college savings? So the first thing I would say is, let's look at where your college savings is.
Hmm.
If your college savings is in a 529 plan and it's in age-based adjustment options and your child's a senior, you might have a little bit of a dip there, but it might not be so astronomical where it would make sense to delay using it and hope to rebound
Hmm.
because you're probably in fairly conservative investments and you might not have a great opportunity to rebound. Now, if you're waiting on your company stock options or things like that, that a lot of folks use to help pay for college, that's a little bit different of a discussion because those can be hugely impacted because you're in one single unit of something. So what I will say is that while interest rates are rising, they are not, they've been at historic lows for like 10 years.
Yeah.
So we're starting to normalize to some degree. They are still not astronomically high. We're not looking at interest rates in the 8s and 9s and 10% on traditional student loans or even mortgages. We're looking at interest rates that are higher than maybe what you would like to see if you're borrowing, but they're not so astronomical that it really is something that I would be hugely concerned about. So I would say, depending on where you're invested and how your investment is looking, you might want to explore what the rates you could get are. Now, for each individual, that's going to be different. So I would explore and compare your options.
So really no clear answer on is it better to borrow or to continue or to use your savings.
It's
Um,
not, yeah, it's not for everybody. So if you have, like I said, a 529 plan, it probably makes sense maybe to use that and let's once again see how far that gets us. If
mhm.
you're in your company stock and your options are worth nothing, Well, then maybe the only option is to borrow. And so
Right.
we can see what borrowing makes sense for us. So it really depends on what assets you have and whether you can pull from something else. And a lot of families right now are just going to need to borrow, and that's just a fact of the matter. So it would be, how do we minimize the impact of that borrowing?
Right. So let's talk about that. What are some suggestions you have for minimizing the cost of borrowing itself as interest rates rise?
Yeah, so there's maybe 2 or 3 options that I consider. The first is, if you are able to pay on the loan while the student is in college, even if it's only interest on to be doing that. So the big impact of rising interest rates is when that interest continues to compound. So if you're borrowing a private student loan, for example, that interest is compounding. So the interest is growing upon interest upon growing upon interest. And if you're able to pay that while your student is enrolled, well, then that $20,000 loan that you borrowed this year will be $20,000 when your student gets out. And your monthly payment may be a few dollars higher right now, but it should help that student in the long run with that loan payment. So that would be number one.
And just to clarify on that,
Yeah.
so I know when I took out student loans, I didn't start paying on them until I graduated, but interest did not start accruing until that point. So you're talking about different loans that parents would be taking out that are going to start accruing interest as soon as you take the loan out.
So either a parent loan that starts accruing interest right away, so that could be a Parent Plus loan, or it could be a private student loan that a parent would likely co-sign for a student that they borrow through a private bank or a state-based organization.
Okay.
Those loans will start accruing interest right away, and some of the student governmental loans will as well. So depending on where you're borrowing, there are multiple different facets that may have interest accruing right away.
Got it. Okay. So for those, the key is try to at least pay off the interest or pay on the interest while your student is in school. That way you keep the principal amount the same. And when they graduate, it's just less that they're having to pay back.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
So
That's
that would be
option one.
Another thing to think about would be, okay, so if interest rates are rising, what are the best ways to minimize my interest rate? And so there are a couple of things to think about there. So if you are paying on loans, many different lenders will have an interest rate reduction if you have automatic payments come out. So if you're looking to do automatic payments, you can get a 0.25% interest rate reduction, a slight benefit to that interest rate. And then loans with more generous interest rates tend to be not only federal loans first, but then also for parents who are looking to borrow above and beyond those federal loans, using a piece of collateral can help get a better interest rate. Generally, the piece of collateral on this type of borrowing tends to be a home.
Right.
So if you're really concerned about the interest rate and you're not concerned about paying this off over the long term, and you're not concerned about your overall financial health or your physical health, borrowing against the home has some really good pros to it, the interest rate. Now, there are plenty of cons to it too, in that you're putting your home at risk because you are borrowing against it. But if you're in a fairly good financial position, considering borrowing against your home, those interest rates still tend to be the lowest because there is collateral against it.
Right. Right. Okay, that makes sense. So those are the two options, or do you have a
I've got
third?
one more, and
Okay.
it comes just back to general budgeting, right? So in this time, and like I said, I was here in 2010 when I was talking about almost the exact same thing. The market's down, interest rates are a little bit up. What are we going to do? And the last piece of conversation comes back to, you've got to make sure your student is making really good choices now. The good choices on where they live on campus, good choices of whether they need to live on campus or not. Good choices on their meal plan, and good choices on making sure they graduate in 4 years. And so all of these little things that is a few $1,000s here and there can really, really add up, especially if you are borrowing to pay for that. So making sure your student understands what are good decisions and bad decisions, and what decisions they need to consult with their parents on before they make.
Right.
And that would be a big thing for students who are going into their second year, maybe to look someplace else to live on campus. That can be a big change from year 1 to year 2.
Right. I mean, I'm even thinking about decisions that my son just made when he was committing or paid his deposit and he had to fill out for the meal plan. And we had agreed that he eats a lot. So he's
Yeah,
getting the biggest meal plan that they
yeah,
offer. But we're going to take a look at it because he can change after a semester. So one of the things we'll be doing is, so did you use all three swipes every single day? Or did you
right.
find that you really didn't go to breakfast and then you really ultimately only went to the dining hall twice in a day? So can we eliminate that third visit to the dining hall? And if he's using it, awesome. I'm more than happy for him to have it. But if he's not using it, we want to evaluate and take that away, right? So things like that feel
Well,
like little
and
things.
having your son be mindful of, I do have 3 swipes a day, so I don't need to go out to get food someplace else that is not paid for uh,
Yes.
at this time, which is, challenging. But maybe if you think about this as this can be a special treat for me with some friends once in a while, but that should not be my mainstay.
Right. And one of the things that we've agreed on for my son is he'll earn all his spending money. So over the course of this summer and then during the school year, that's going to be on him. So I can take money that I would maybe normally be giving to him for these little things
Right,
and put that to paying for school. Same with my grocery bill is astronomical. That
right,
money, that money I'm saving is going to go, it's not like I'm not spending the money anymore,
right.
but I'm just spending it differently. And in this case, it's going to the meal plan, but that's money I don't have to then worry about accounting for in my daily spending in my own life.
And that's a perfect example of exactly what I'm talking about. Look at those ways that you can reduce your borrowing in general, and that's one way, right? If
Hmm.
he's covering his spending money and you're taking the grocery money, then inevitably is $100 a week higher just because of him, at least.
Yes, at
That,
least.
that right there is $500 a month that you can take and pay towards college, reducing your borrowing by $6,000 a year.
Right, which is huge when you think about it that way,
Huge.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
especially with increasing interest rates,
right.
it's going to be even more money than that by the time he graduates. So I'm trying, I am
So
doing
we
my
do have
very
breaking
best.
news. Do you want
Oh,
to
we
know the
do.
breaking news? We
Let's
do.
have the breaking news. And this is
Okay.
real.
This is real. So interest rates next year, they are going up. So for undergraduate federal direct Stafford loans, 4.993, which is up from 3.734. So up about 1.25 points. For graduate student loans, for direct Stafford loans for graduate students, 6.543, which is up once again about 1.25 points. And then the Parent Plus loans, so federal
Mm.
direct Parent Plus loans, these are the most expensive. It's 7.543, which is up once again about 1.25 points. So, about what we were expecting. Now, still, I will look at this and say to parents, remember when you were borrowing,
Hmm.
uh, a federal student loan was probably not less than 5%. So they're still reasonable rates for the student loans, not outstanding, not record lows, but they're not as bad as they once were. So once again, if you're comparing borrowing versus spending, it's something to consider.
All right, really important news, and I'm glad we were able to share it. Last question I have for you today. You mentioned you were talking about 529 plans a little bit earlier, and you mentioned something about if you had it in an age-based
Right.
plan but I think this relates to that. Are there things you recommend families do with the underlying investments in their 529 plan to protect them as much as possible against these rising rates?
So it's tough to think about what to do right now, because right now, if you have a 529 plan that has been relatively volatile, meaning that your underlying investments were stock-based options and things like that, you're probably looking at it right now and saying, geez, I took such a hit and I'm feeling it and it pains me to look at. So to suddenly shift and move to a very conservative option, you're saying, well, can I do that and really take the 30% hit that I took?
Yeah.
Uh, what I would say is that this just shows the underlying importance of having maybe investments that are automatically timed if you are not going to do so yourself to change over time. So for those who out there who are savers and maybe have children not as close to college, consider this. You think the stock market's going to continue going up and everything's going to be great, but sometimes things happen. And this last year has shown just how things happen. It had been great for a long time, and people wanted to ride that wave. And now they're feeling the hurt if they didn't change their investment options at the right time. So if you took a big hit, the question is, are you willing to take that hit now and move it over to something conservative and look at your overall spending for the next 4 years? Or are you saying, I'm willing to go lower, or I'm willing to take the risk to possibly go higher? That's, it's the gamble. It's the gamble that you have when you're playing with a child's educational money.
Right. And so for those families who don't have seniors, your advice is you probably want to have it automated so that it's going to adjust as your child gets closer to the age and gets a little more conservative when you're getting ready to start paying for college.
For folks who are not going to do it on their own and who have some risk adverseness, that is certainly something that takes the play out of your hands and moves it into somebody who's paid to do that, essentially.
Okay, awesome. Alex, as always, really great advice and information. I use these sessions as planning for my own situation, so I find them particularly valuable. So thank you so much for being here today.
I was glad to do it. Thanks, Beth.
All right. We are going to, again, take a quick break. And when we come back, we're talking about recommendation letters. So don't go away.